Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Coffee with Chosen. My name is Jenni Lord. I am the CEO of Chosen, and I am so privileged and honored to introduce our special guest today. Her name is Lisa Qualls. Lisa is an author that has just released a new book called The Connected Parent. She is also wife to Russ and has 12 children, 7 biological and 5 adopted. I'm going to let her tell a little bit about that story, but she is an accomplished speaker, author, writer, and podcaster, and we are so privileged to have you here today with us, Lisa. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So what did I leave out of your bio that you would like for people to know about you?
Well, I will correct one thing. I actually have 8 children by birth, but it's a little bit confusing. My family's patched together in all these different ways, but I have actually a son who was born when I was a young teen, and he was actually adopted by another family. So I am a first or birth mom. And then together, Russ and I had 7 children, and then we adopted 4 from Ethiopia. So, and we fostered as well. We've had a teen foster daughter for 2.5 years.
Okay, wonderful. Well, you are speaking to the right audience because
Okay.
most of our caregivers are foster or adoptive parents, and we do have some kinship parents as well who are listening in today. So you're speaking their language. So before we get started and talking about this new book, I want to back up for just a moment and tell you about The Connected Child. The Connected Child was released by Dr. Karyn Purvis and Dr. Cross in 2007, and that work was absolutely pivotal in our space. It was just a game changer. And if you're not familiar with Dr. Purvis's work here in Texas, she had about 20 years of developmental psychology research in studying neurology and the development of children, and had groundbreaking revelations on how trauma impacts children's brain and how healing is possible. And that work, The Connected Child, was the culmination of her studies. Lisa, did I leave anything out about that?
No, I think that's great.
Okay. Well, I know when The Connected Child came on the scene in the first decade of this century, it was revolutionary. In fact, our board president, he ordered, several hundred copies, and he would carry it around in his trunk and hand it out to foster and adoptive parents, like, you have to read this. It was just so life-changing for him personally, and then also for so many parents that he was seeing. So it truly was revolutionary and came on the heels of what we call the decade of the brain and understanding how trauma had impacted the brain. So Lisa has just released, in fact, just last week, has released this new book called not The Connected Child, but The Connected Parent, and it was written in conjunction with Dr. Purvis, who passed away in 2016. And so, Lisa, can you tell us, like, how is The Connected Parent different from the first work of The Connected Child, and why now? Why has this book come to be?
Well, like you said, The Connected Child I had a profound impact on me and my family. And, I came to find Dr. Purvis out of desperate need, like so many other parents. And I don't know if we'll talk about that more later, but The Connected Child, it gave us a whole new way of looking at our children, of understanding that there was meaning behind their behavior, and that if we could disarm fear and we could give them the right balance of structure and nurture, we could begin to bring healing. And so it was a wonderful, wonderful book. What I found in my experience, though, in every book that I read, is they were usually written by incredible professionals who I respect and admire, and they helped me immensely. But I would find myself thinking, okay, but what does that actually look like in a family? Like, how does a mom do that when she's got 4 children all around her in the kitchen and she's trying to feed them, and then she's supposed to implement this strategy? What does it look like? How does it work? And I remember thinking, if only I could see it. If only I could watch another mom do this. So as I got to know Dr. Purvis through some writing and speaking, I came to her with an idea for a book. And I said, what if we could take my real life stories of doing my best to implement trust-based relational intervention and that kind of parenting with my children, with all of your knowledge as a developmental psychologist and this beautiful program you developed, what if we could bring those together into one book? And through a series of conversations, she agreed. She thought it was a great idea from the beginning and agreed to write the book with me. And it was really on me to figure out how the book was going to be laid out, what the format was going to be, but then we wrote the chapters together. And every chapter begins with a story from my family, and then Dr. Purvis's teaching, and then more story from my family of how we implement it, closes every chapter. So you're really blending two voices, a professional and a parent. And I was a very experienced parent. I mean, before we ever adopted, I'd been a mom for 20 years, and still I needed all of this. So I hope that my voice comes through as a mom who had a lot of experience, but had to take it to this next level of therapeutic parenting using this model. So we have two voices. We also have the whole first section of the book is focused on attachment. What is it? Why is it so important? And the second chapter in there is really important because we start talking about our own histories as parents and what we're bringing into the relationship with our child and understanding our own attachment styles and triggers and all of that. Then there's a whole section of the book that's on strategies where I'm teaching together with Dr. Purvis about things like scripts and sensory needs and nurture to heal, all these kinds of things. And then the last section of the book is on really how to care for yourself for this incredibly long journey. So there's more emphasis on attachment. There's emphasis on caring for yourself as a parent. There's, the language of TBRI has grown and changed since the Connected Child came out in 2007. And we also have a whole chapter on teens. So those are some of the ways that it's different. Why is it coming out now is kind of an interesting question because we started writing in 2012. And Dr. Purvis was diagnosed with cancer. And so for a period of time, of course, she didn't work on the book at all. And during that time, I continued to work. And then when she was well again, she worked more on the book, and we were just emailing chapters back and forth and having phone conversations. And then, we were really doing some very difficult parenting, and our family was in a lot of crisis for a period of time. And that slowed me down, but throughout, we just kept going forward, slow and sure. And then at the very end of 2014, my husband and I were in a very tragic car accident with our daughter, Kalkidan, and we lost our daughter, and I was injured in that accident. And I remember thinking at that point that I didn't know if I would ever be able to finish this book, if I'd ever be able to write again. I just had no idea. And grief, anybody who's been through grief, which is almost everybody, it's a very unpredictable thing. It's almost, we don't all go through it in a nice, tidy way. And so I just didn't know. But after I'd recovered a little bit, I reached back out to Dr. Purvis and I said, I need to finish this for Kalkidan because she's the whole reason that I wrote this book. She's the reason that my need was so great that I found Dr. Purvis and just threw myself into connected parenting. And so she said, okay, and we were working hard, and then her cancer came back. So really up till nearly the end of her life, she was working on the book. She called me once during treatment in Seattle. She was working on a chapter. So I think it's, God gave us the ability to persevere because this book mattered so much to both of us. And it is her last written work. And I'm so unbelievably honored that I got to write this with her. And after she passed away, I waited a while, and then I reached out to her family and I said, do you want this book finished? And they said, yes, we absolutely want it finished. So another little interesting part to that story is that, there were some chapters that weren't in completely final form yet. And so Emily Pickett came in to help me finish because Emily was Dr. Purvis's assistant for years and continues to work for the Institute. And she was able to take some of the drafts that weren't quite done and just pull them all together really beautifully using Dr. Purvis's words, using lectures and interviews and all kinds of things to really bring Dr. Purvis's words and all those chapters to completion. So it's coming out now because this is how long it took. But we're thrilled. We're just so
Well,
thrilled.
you know, Lisa, I didn't know all of that history, but I love the redemptive nature of what you just shared. That's really powerful. Before we kind of dive into some of the meaty parts that you mentioned before, I want to pull out a couple of quotes that I think are powerful. Um, Early trauma changes a child's brain chemistry and it will not automatically heal. They need insightful, precise, skillful parenting to bring them to success. Parents can help their children counteract the chemistry of harm and experience a chemistry of healing. That is the basis of really this work, right? It is that hope and understanding that through attachment that a child can heal and overcome their traumatic history, and that's the essence of how this was birthed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you talked about, you have this book's broken up into 3 sections, and the first one is the heart of relationships, and you dive right into attachment, which is very similar to Chosen's work. Our focus is on, we believe, and it's scientifically proven, that it is the attachment that brings healing. And so you start there and you talk about how a child, that attachment has been violated usually at a younger age in their life, violated over and over again, where they have experienced tremendous loss, and it shapes not just their biochemistry, but also their belief system, right?
Right. It shapes their belief systems about themselves and about the world and about all the people around them. And so when we step into that as their parents, we're stepping into into their fear. And I think we have to prove ourselves faithful. And I talk about that in the book. Like it's the repetition over and over and over of building trust, one interaction at a time. And of course, we are very human and we're going to fail probably a lot. But I think we also can learn from Dr. Purvis about the beauty and importance of repair, of seeking forgiveness, of redoing things. Like we talk about saying to our kids, try that again with respect. Sometimes I have to try things again because I've said them in a way that's wounding and does not communicate love and trust, And so, yes, there's so much that we are given this opportunity. It's really an opportunity to walk alongside our children in this journey. And it's long. This is not something that's like, oh, today they have secure attachment. No, it's a long, long road.
Well, I know for me personally and our family, and we've been connected to foster and adoption for 25 years in a variety of ways. And what I have seen is that there wasn't an emphasis on what you just described 20 years ago. I didn't know that, and people weren't talking about that. So I think it's so important that it's at the forefront of these discussions and repairing that damage that has been done, and that there's hope that we actually can do that through the relationship. I want to talk about the second chapter too, because I think that this is an often little understood part of the journey. And you talk about knowing yourself as a parent in this journey. Sometimes with a kid's traumatic history, there's so much emphasis on what's happened to them and their behaviors, and yet you're bringing to light about knowing yourself. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. First of all, what I want to say is that when I first began hearing this, what I heard as an adoptive parent who was struggling, what my brain heard was, this is probably your fault. You are bringing your messed up self and your childhood that was far from perfect, even though it was good, but far from perfect. You're bringing that into this relationship and you're making it all worse. That was how I felt at first. I felt like I am trying to keep my head above water. I'm trying to do the best job I can. And now I feel like you're just pushing me back under, And it took a while for me to understand that this is not, we do not need to judge ourselves or each other. We need to look at ourselves with compassion, be curious about ourselves, about, why does that why do I feel that way? Why do I have this really big emotional response when this happens with my child? Because it's probably really not about my child. Maybe it's about something that happened when I was young. And so I think what we wanted to do was encourage parents to reflect and really think about what are our areas that we need to be examining. And a lot of that we can do on our own. We can do it with a spouse. If we have a spouse, we can do it with a good friend. We might need a therapist to help us walk through some of that, and that's okay. That's a good thing, to seek professional help. And I know you offer incredible coaching, and I'm sure that's part of what coaching can do too, is help us reflect on, oh wow, when my child does that, I feel this unreasonable response. Why might that be?
Yes, I think Dr. Purvis coined that phrase of, you can't lead a child to a place of healing that you haven't gone yourself. Right. And so it's so important to kind of peel back our own layers so we understand where those triggers for us may be coming from, and how that's impacting the relationship with the child that we're trying to help heal. Right. I wanted to pull out this quote from this chapter that was so powerful. I often say that it is only as I heal my own history that I can know the right path to lead a child to heal their own history. So if you can't go to your own sadness, you can't lead your son to his. If you can't go to your own fear, you can't lead your daughter to hers. If you can't go to your own loss, you can't lead your teenager to theirs. If you were harmed, it's important to acknowledge and grieve that harm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Just thinking about some of that reminds me of a lot of conversations I had with my foster daughter, who was a teen. She came to us as a teen and was with us for 2.5 years. And, she was old enough that with her, I could actually reflect on some things from my life and have conversation with her. And I think it was really healing, and it was really beautiful, because I was able to understand her in ways that she didn't know I could, until I was willing and able to sort of share that. Of course, we don't need to do that with young kids, but with a teen, reflecting on myself and being able to share with her built attachment with her.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that there's vulnerability in that too, because that's really the foundation of trust in a relationship, right? It's being willing to, one, acknowledge to yourself and maybe to a guide in that what you've been through, but then also the ability to share with and I have a couple of teenage daughters myself, and I know that when you can do that in an age appropriate way, when you reflect on your past, it actually helps to build the relationship, just like you were saying.
Another thing I think that's important about reflecting on our own history is, if we have a partner, if we're married, our spouse is bringing themselves into the relationship with the child too. So first of all, you have these two people who have probably very different histories coming together in marriage. So right there, that's complex. And then we bring in children with trauma. And the things that are unresolved in each of us are going to come out and affect that relationship. So it's really important that we be willing to be curious and reflect back.
Lisa, one of the things that I loved about this book was how in every chapter, just like you described, you shared personal things, personal pieces of your stories. And obviously you protected your child's history and story, but you did it in such an authentic way to just say, this was a struggle for me. And I know from myself, disrespect has been a trigger for me. Why is that? That's tied to a deeper fear that I've had to uproot. And so doing that work is really important, I think, in helping your children overcome what they've been through.
Yes, definitely. And as I have really explored some of this, I've found that I think there's a lot of fear for me that affects the way I parent, and when I have to really work on keeping that under control. Yeah. And there are a whole lot of reasons that I have that, but that was quite a revelation to me. And I remember one night at the dinner table, one of my children saying to me, Mom, why are you so mad about this? I don't even remember what the conversation was. I said, oh, I'm not mad. And they said, well, you look mad. And all of a sudden it came into my brain that sad looks like mad, or fear. I thought, oh, actually, I'm not mad. I'm scared. And it was coming out as anger. So, oh gosh, we can learn so much about ourselves, right?
Yeah, kids will do that for you, for
Oh
sure.
yeah. Yeah, especially teenagers.
I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
So the second section of the book talks about those real life strategies, and there's several chapters that are broken down, and I would love for you to share just a little bit about that section. But one of the things that you mentioned earlier about, why is this book important and why now? One of the things that we've learned with our parents that we're serving is we're asking them to parent in perhaps a way that they've never seen before. We're asking them to shift into a paradigm, certainly that they weren't raised with. And so actually applying these principles that Dr. Purvis developed with TBRI, trust-based relational intervention, applying those principles can be very difficult. And so I think that your work honed in on that so that we could make this practical for parents. So can you share a few of those kind of key points from those real life strategies that you wanted to share with people in the book?
Sure. Well, I would say as we're getting feedback about the book, the one thing that keeps coming up over and over, people are saying, thank you for telling me about scripts. Now, of course, if you've known TBRI, if you've already learned it, you've heard Dr. Purvis talk about scripts, but people seem to really, really like them and like hearing how I use them because our brains are tired, right? Like we are working so hard as parents. And when we can apply a simple tool, something as simple as a script, which is just a short phrase that we use to direct our children toward optimal behavior. And it's, something that we use the same phrase over and over so they understand what we're talking about. And once we have those simple things, it makes dealing with things with our kids easier, like try that again with respect. Such a great script, probably the one I use the very, very most, even still, because I have middle schoolers. Dr. Purvis would say in her beautiful Texas way, let me see your beautiful eyes, to get a child to give eye contact. There are just so many things. And so I think that is one of the tools that we're hearing a lot about that people are loving. We have a list of scripts for young children, a list for older children and teens, and we really encourage families to develop their own. I mean, most families, we have things we say to each other. And if we think about what those are scripts in their own way, So just having these simple phrases to use, I think, is one of the tools that people are really loving.
Well, and I think too, it's so there's a practical part of that of just something on tap when we're starting to lose it a little bit. But then also it is actually rewiring our brains and rewiring our children's brain to go to that as a way to handle things that's in a healthy way, so that when any of us are tempted to go to that lower brain and lose our executive functioning, we can call on that script to help us. And I've even been known to have one of my kids say, Mom, do you want to redo?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other great thing about scripts is they actually build trust, because our children, they have this chemistry of fear, and a script becomes something they really understand it. They're not having to guess what we mean. They understand it. It's shared language. And so scripts, I think, they build trust, and I think they give a sense of family, like this is how my family says that.
Yeah, I love that. I know you have a chapter on teens that I found to be helpful as well. So I highly encourage you to pick up the book. The last section, which is so important for our audience and so important to those of you who are caring for vulnerable children, talks about hope and strength for the journey. So just unpack that for us a little bit today, Lisa.
Well, I think we all know that this is certainly a long journey. And I have adult children, and I'm still parenting. I mean, let's be honest. When your kids are in their 20s, you are still parenting. And so I think this takes a lot of endurance. So how are we going to stick with it day after day, year after year? And so we talk about ways to truly care for yourself, because your brain needs to be nurtured in a sense. And actually that is one of the things that's been found the most, is that parents need to be nurtured just like our children do. And so we talk about ways to help your brain be healthy. We talk about, getting help, professional help if you need it. But probably one thing that sticks out the most to me is just the importance of community, the importance of having at least one friend, even just one, who you can be really honest with. And it needs to be a friend that not only can you be honest with, but someone who's going to speak truth to you, someone who loves your child, and someone, if you're a believer, then you need someone who's going to speak God's truth to you. Because what we don't need is someone to say, yeah, this is probably too hard, or, if you'd only do this, or, it needs to be a judgment-free person who can come alongside us, pray for us, walk with us. If you can form a whole team of people, all the better. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about Chosen, is that you're providing that for people, because it's not always easy to find, and it's not easy to find in the church, because like you said, our parenting is going to look different. And
well, and that is one of the things that many people come to us, and they in crisis, and a lot of friends, well-meaning friends and families that love this person, and they're seeing the depth of struggle, and they're like, maybe you just need to, maybe this just isn't for you, and giving them an out. And they're not necessarily looking for an out, they need that encouragement to keep going. Lisa shared this powerful story about community in her book, and I won't steal it because it was so precious, you need to read it, but where a friend was just able to minister to her daughter in a time of crisis, really, that Lisa, out of desperation, called her friend. And it was just a beautiful picture of that community that you're describing, that's absolutely essential to healing and
Yes.
help and hope in this journey, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's really made all the difference. I think so many things in our life changed, when we added children that had such severe needs. I mean, we ended up needing to change churches. We had, certainly some of our closest friends have walked with us through and through, but we really found a whole nother circle of friends that we have desperately needed and we hold on to.
That's wonderful to hear. So Lisa, is there any one thing that you would want to share with our audience today that we haven't covered?
Well, I would like to say, first of all, this is what the book looks like, and I want you to see it is not hefty. This is a book that you can read even if you're tired, even if you're like, I can't handle one more thing. It's very readable. It's very easy, I think, to find what you're looking for, because I literally remember kneeling in front of my bookcase, my daughter in all-out crisis, pulling books off the shelf thinking, okay, which book said this? Where can I find this? And not being able in my dysregulated brain to even find what I was looking for. So I think we made the book very easy to find the right tools. And I hope to, what I'm hearing from people is that there's a very encouraging, hopeful, compassionate tone. And definitely that's what I want parents to hear, because I am still in it. I am still in the thick of parenting. I'm not like, oh, it's all over and I came out of it and I'm such an incredible success. No, I'm right in it too. And I think people can feel that in the book.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And it was very readable. A lot of books in our space can get kind of heady in the science, but this one was very accessible. And I love that you can quickly pick it up and find those resources for your teen or whatever it is that you might need. So Lisa, before we go today, where can people find you? Where can they find the book? And we'll make sure that we get that. We'll have those links in this post as well, but where can they find you?
Well, my website is onethankfulmom.com. And on my website, you can find my blog. You can find information about the book. I have a community I run, all kinds of things. So that's on my website. I'm One Thankful Mom on Facebook and on Instagram. And I also have a podcast called The Adoption Connection. It's a website and a podcast, and people can find me there too.
That's so wonderful. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today, and just mad props to you and kudos for great work. And we're so thankful for this posthumous work that is coming out with you and Dr. Purvis. It's just a beautiful thing for our audience. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely.